how does one finance like a major rehab when you can't use traditional banking?
Yeah, that is literally the million and billion dollar question in our and for scope of the need, cannabis is now today doing around 25 billion in sales nationally. I mean, this is a big industry. Best estimates say that the total net economic impact gross for the country could be as high as 150 billion, maybe even 200 billion in the decades to come. I mean, we have decent data from the history of crime reports of how much, impounding of product, arrests have been related to narcotics. Unfortunately, marijuana still being a federally illegal substance. So we know this is a hugely growing and high consumer demand industry. With those types of industries come major real estate financing needs. Exactly what you're asking, Gordon. Our best estimates is that over the next decade, there will be a need for around 80 to 90 billion with a B worth of commercial real estate infrastructure investment and development. Again, these are huge grow sites, 50, $100 million greenhouse agricultural projects. We saw those happen in Canada. And you got to be careful with those because a lot of companies want high technology automation. That's a very customized tenant improvement that could be difficult to gain highest and best use value if your cannabis tenant has challenges. But also just retail consumer facing dispensary doors, commercial sites. There are currently around 9,000 active retail cannabis licenses in this country. Liquor's got around 42,000. So, if you look at coffee shops or liquor doors, probably some serious room for growth. This year alone, there were about 2,500 additional retail licenses added to the national space. So we're probably looking at 6 to 8 billion for retail commercial development. So that's the scale. How do we get that money? That's what everyone's asking. Until there's federal reform, your best options are local credit unions, local banks, private lenders. We secured a long-term 10-year debt structure recently with a bank. And we kind of got in right at the squeak. We locked in around 7.5% interest rate for cannabis projects on a 10-year term. Obviously, with interest rates today rising, those get really challenging. Variable rate, prime plus 2, prime plus 4, which is what you tend to see in cannabis real estate financing on the debt side. That's a lot more expensive today, especially on a 5-year loan. And bridge and mezz funding, especially when there's cannabis use involved, tends to be, 3-year term or shorter at can be 12 to 15% once you add upfront points. So a lot of times private investors is your best bet. You contact with the family office, you show your experience in real estate development investing, you have a good operator in tow. We're really focused on working directly with clients we've served and know well on the investment side. So we know the group, we know their sophistication, we're not going into a project blind. That's really important in commercial real estate investing and development in the cannabis space. But yeah, the only other option that's really funded the majority of the cannabis space have been real estate investment trusts. They've been primarily focused on large scale industrial and commercial sites, so that house the cultivation, the supply chain side, obviously bigger bang for the buck rather than focusing on small footprint retail. So, and,
Yeah.
and that's our specialty. Our focus is small retail because we love the frequency. We have the expertise to navigate projects efficiently, but there's probably around, our best guess, somewhere around 20, maybe even as high as 30 billion has gone into the commercial cannabis space so far. And probably about 15 of that was through cannabis REITs. But it's, as a cannabis operator, if anyone in the audience is looking to run a business and find those real estate solutions, the metrics are obviously really important. Just because someone is willing to give you a couple million or even 10 million to fund your site, you sign a lease, you got to make sure you can make that rental payment. How big's the delta from non-cannabis use? So if you're an outside investor, maybe you like being an LP and you're looking at some cannabis funds to put some money into, what's that managing partnership? What's that GP looking at? Are they putting that capital into projects that have a 10 times delta if something goes wrong, and all of a sudden what's the dark value? Those are all critical elements you need to be familiar with if you're going to get involved in the space. But I'll just conclude that whole ramble with saying the opportunity is huge. This is probably a once in a generation, emerging industry. If you can figure out how to navigate that labyrinth, there is a pretty significant reward at the end of the risk.
A change of pace from the get rich quick gurus. Subscribe to the Real Finds podcast for in-depth conversations with voices shaping the real estate world.